Hey everybody, welcome to the Scott Mann Podcast. This is a really cool one. I'm super excited about this. This is the first time I've ever sat down with Afghan American and advocate for the Afghan resistance, Jazz Cannon. You know, Jazz and I have known each other since, I think, the collapse in Afghanistan in 2021, and she has continued to be a public voice for, advocating for helping the resistance stand up against the Taliban, but more importantly, very much with a perspective towards keeping America safe and honoring the service of our veterans who served in Afghanistan, and just being a persistent voice in that regard. She's a tireless voice behind the scenes that really helps Legend and his efforts to change the game at a strategic level to really take place. And her story is really, really cool. I want to remind you too that when this interview is over, go over to Patreon and check out there, because there's some really cool behind the scenes stuff that we always do before every interview when our guests come, and Legend and Jazz are no exception. There's some really cool, candid, behind the scenes conversations that I want you to check out. But in this interview, you are going to get a perspective from Jazz Cannon that I guarantee you've never had before. We have some really open and frank dialogue about everything from the targeting of women in Afghanistan by the Taliban to the very difficult conversation of evacuation versus resistance, and how we come to terms with that as a civil society here in America and as a veteran population and beyond. And a lot of other things that her point of view is just, I think, is really informative. And most of all, you guys, she lived it. She lived the evacuation from Afghanistan during the first Taliban rise to power, just like Legend did, although they didn't know each other. She spent a decade of her life in Pakistan, completely displaced out of her home country and trying to make their way to the West. And so the stuff she's going to talk about, the connections that she's built, the relationships, the social capital, the stories she tells, they're all informed from that lived experience of displacement. And also, I'll just call out that here lately, we've been talking to a range of individuals who immigrated to America from some very hard circumstances. And it's just so cool to see how in many cases, they're the last ones still fighting for it. It's an awesome interview, and I'll see you on the other side. Welcome to the Scott Mann Podcast, where we connect like our lives depend on it. All right, Jazz. Well, it is awesome to have you here. This is the first time you and I have ever sat down in an interview.
I know we have. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's so. What do you think of the space?
I think this is amazing.
Yeah.
And I love the flag behind you.
I know me
who
too.
rescued it.
I know. And you know what? So we're going to get right into it with that flag. In fact, so people have seen you visibly in public spaces advocating for Afghanistan, advocating for our veterans, advocating for the resistance. But I think it's an opportunity for people to get to know you a little bit. And so the first question I have for you is, thinking about all that you've been through in your life, and it's a lot, and you never talk about it, but it's a lot, right? You've, like so many of our Afghan brothers and sisters that left the country when the Taliban took over, and what you've had to go through in refugee camps and making your way to the States, things like that. You see that flag behind me, and you know the history of what happened to it. You presented it to me and the team at the Franklin show of Last Out in the talkback. Very emotional. I was wrecked. What goes through your mind and your heart when you see that flag right now, thinking about where we are 4 years after, the betrayal of Afghanistan and where we are? What goes through your mind?
Personally, for me, U.S. gave me my freedom. And this itself is, it's a win for me, personally. Yeah. Coming from where I came from and seeing the fall of Afghanistan, my birth country, it was not an easy moment for me, even at the time when I presented it to you. I felt that people don't understand the value of freedom. Not many people understand that, but I do because I know what I have gone through. So yes, it weighed heavy in my heart.
You know, it's interesting. You haven't met them, but I had Romy and Gabby Camargo on before talking to you, before talking to Legend. Romy and I have been in Special Forces together a lot of years. He's quadriplegic, ventilator dependent, shot through the neck in Afghanistan on a humanitarian patrol. One of the most amazing humans I've ever met, Gabby as well. But here's what's really interesting. So they've opened a spinal cord injury center for not just veterans, but civilians that has changed the game in how we deal with spinal cord injury, Parkinson's, traumatic brain injuries. And they do this as a nonprofit. And Romy can't move from the shoulders down, right? But yet they've found a way to bring Americans together and rally around taking a step toward recovery. And they've shown us what's possible. And they have fought harder. And if you ask Romy to this day, if you say, hey, man, and I've heard it, I'm so sorry for what happened to you. I'm so sorry that you've been paralyzed for, this many years, since 2008. You know what he says? The American people are worth it. To this day, that's what he says. And, I look over at Gabby, his wife, who is stuck by his side, this lioness, like you, immigrants, both of them, or their parents immigrated to the United States. And they say the same thing. They say the same thing about their freedom and what it means to be an American. Legend says the same thing. So that's 4 different points of interview in the last month that have all said the same thing around that flag and that question. Wow. What do you make of that?
I believe the pain is real because I feel it in my heart. And you served in Afghanistan. So first of all, thank you for your service. And you saw the people of Afghanistan. How many years did you serve?
I did 3 tours there.
3 tours?
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So you really saw the lifestyle and the culture of Afghanistan. The Afghan people really relied, these past 20 years, on the American troops. They felt, I should say this, they felt safe, and they felt that progress was evolving over the course of the past 20 years.
Right.
For you being there and being in their view gave them hope, gave them encouragement. And so they were able to progress, the amount of progress that they've made in their schooling system, education-wise, infrastructure-wise, economy-wise. That's just because you were there. And so suddenly, with the collapse, they just felt a great sense of betrayal. And how many of them are going to recover, I don't know. But I believe that we can turn this around.
Yeah.
We can work to give Afghan people back Afghanistan from the Taliban.
And this is something that you've been very visible in public spaces, on social media, advocating for the resistance in Afghanistan, advocating for the Afghan people, but also for our veterans, and encouraging Americans to pay attention to Afghanistan and to not lose sight of what's happening over there. At a time when we have a new administration coming in, and there's a lot of talk about America first, not nation building and things like that, why is it so important to you that we stay focused on Afghanistan and at least pay attention to what's happening? Why is that so important to you right now at this point in history?
I can speak from a women's perspective.
Yeah, please.
I was a little bit background about me. When the first reign of the Taliban in the mid 90s, that was a time when we escaped Afghanistan. My father worked during the Dr. Najibullah's government, and he was the 3rd secretary of the embassy in Iraq. And so when he returned, that's when, just the regime changed, and then the Taliban. took over after a few years, and then with him and all of the family members, all of us, we were on the hit list.
Right.
And so my father had no choice but to get us evacuated, have us escape from Afghanistan and cross the border to Pakistan.
So you've lived the evacuation.
Yes. I was a child. May have been maybe 7, 8 years old.
Right.
But I remember all of the evacuation fear and the uncertainty, whether we're going to make it from one checkpoint to another checkpoint to another checkpoint to get to safety. And
there were no U.S. forces this first time.
No.
It was whatever you had was how you got out, right?
Exactly. Yes. But it doesn't end there. We were hoping that maybe if we stay in Pakistan for, a couple of weeks maybe,
Right.
and then the things will change, and then, we can go back. But that did not happen. So my father thought, well, I'm going to seek political asylum through the U.S. Embassy. And we tried that, and that didn't work. They said no. So then we ended up thinking we were going to stay in Pakistan for a couple of weeks. It turned into a decade. So I
10 years.
Yes.
In a Pakistan refugee camp.
Yes. Well, we were in the camp, but then after that, we
Sure.
decided to just, kind of go on
Settle
our
there.
own. Yes. And try to live off of our savings. And we had some relatives that was helping us, financially abroad.
Do you mind if I ask also, I think it's a little known fact, and you can talk about this as little or as much as you'd like, but I just think it's fascinating, is that your family, Christian Afghans as well
Yes.
at the time. So it's one thing to be displaced
Yeah.
from a government that is hostile,
Yeah.
but, the religion is in common, ethnicity might be in common. But in this case, the religion was not the predominant religion of the country.
Correct.
So not only were you on the run from as a member of the former regime, despised by the Taliban, but you also were members of a minority religion
Yes.
in a foreign country that was not your country of birth. What was that like?
We used to go to church, but discreetly. We wanted to make sure nobody knew about it. And this is fast forward. I'm trying to, it's a long story, but it wasn't easy. We had Bible studies. In fact, an organization that we found in Islamabad, Pakistan, they were offering us our Bible studies. And so we used to go every Wednesday night to making sure it was at nighttime so that nobody would know where we're going. But we were taking our Bible classes. And it wasn't easy. It was very difficult, and we had to keep everything within the family, you know. And that's why my life was very much constrained as a young girl, growing up in a country that you had to be extremely careful. And so my parents were overprotective of me. So day in and day out, I was at home, homeschooled. And I did not get the social life. Was not exposed to the normal social life that here, in the U.S. you go to elementary, high school, junior high. I did not get to do any of that.
I can't imagine the challenges of being a young girl in that part of the world during that time in history.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was not easy, I should say, without not having friends, not socializing. A few friends here and there, like neighbors, and we used to live in like these high-rise apartments, and it was very hot.
Yeah.
And we had no AC, so there would be nights we would be sleeping like on the carpet with just sheets over our, just to cover ourselves and just hoping that we would get some cool air. I remember I used to soak my bed sheet and then just kind of lay it over me.
Wow.
Because the fan was still on. There would be times when we would have no electricity either.
Right.
So now you're talking about Florida heat, no AC, no electricity, and hoping that, the electricity would come back at some time in the middle of the night and we would feel the cool breeze over my, over my bed sheet so I could get a little bit of a relief.
And how old were you kind of during that time?
At that time, I was like in my early teenage, so I was like maybe 13, 14.
What did you dream about as a girl? Did you have dreams, aspirations? What did you what role did your parents play in any of that? Did you think about life beyond that and what it might look like?
Well, my dad was my hope. My dad was the one who, he was a smart man. He knew the challenges we were facing, and he had limited resources that he was working with as well. So he used the best of it, and I was always looking up to him. And he used to tell us, his siblings, that English is the language of food. So if you learn English...
English is the language of food.
Yes. So if you learn English, you will never have any problems in your future.
So he had a very unique way of getting you all to learn English.
Yes. And his English language wasn't that good, but he knew his way around the world.
But he knew for you all it was essential.
It was essential.
Okay.
Yes. So he chose for us not to go to Pakistani school. He was never a fan of Pakistan anyway, but Urdu, he did not think Urdu was going to benefit us.
Okay.
And we weren't able to afford either.
Right.
So he homeschooled us, and most of our textbooks were all in English. We had a thick dictionary that was, from Farsi to English, and we just had to, learn. That's how we learn. Wow. And then we had a couple of TV channels that were showing CNN. We used to listen to CNN news, not knowing, what's going on because we were minor. But my dad was telling us that, just listen to the pronunciation, the enunciation of words. Just speak so that you don't have an accent. That's why, you might be able to pick up a little bit of accent.
But I mean, your English, not only is it impeccable, but like your enunciation is insanely good.
I tried.
Was that, what was that? Was that
we were
watching
listening
CNN?
to CNN news.
Okay.
And I'm a conservative.
But the dialect, the enunciation, regardless of the political leanings of the medium, it was, I'm sure, a good medium to pick up on.
Yes, we were watching CNN News, BBC News, as well as Cartoon Channel, and it was all because all those cartoon programs were in English, and he was like, just listen and learn.
Wow.
And that's how I learned English.
What did you start, as you started to learn English and you started to get a command of the language, what things did you start to think about for your life and what you aspired to do or be?
Okay. So, there's a time when typewriters became important. And so we weren't able to go to the classroom to learn shorthand. So my father said, well, obviously you guys have a future. I used to think that, well, I'm going to work in an office somewhere, So what he did, one day he comes home and he brings those, the time, I believe those computers were like, those big CPUs and the keyboards with a cord hanging and those white computers. So he brought a keyboard, just the keyboard, not the computer, not the CPU, but just the keyboard with the cord hanging. And he said, okay, well, since we can afford, to get a computer so you guys can learn typing, you're going to get this keyboard. Each one of you, I have two siblings. So each one of you are going to take turns. And you're all going to learn how to type and pretend you're typing.
He seems like my kind of guy.
Before that, when the typewriter came out, he rented for a couple of months, and we learned how to type shorthand. There was this writing in a piece of paper. It said, big brown fox jumped on something like that. So it would cover all the keynotes. Yeah. And so for 2 months, we tried to practice, and after that, we couldn't afford it. That's how he came up with just this keyboard. And he said, keep practicing. So I used to sit on the floor with a pillow in front of me, and I would put this keyboard in front of me, facing the wall, and I would pretend I'm in an office, and I'm a secretary of some CEO, and now I'm going to start typing letters for him or her. So I would have my little, textbook in front of me, and I would keep typing for an hour, a full hour. And I know how to type 80 words per minute.
That's pretty amazing. Yeah, my mom was a typing teacher, so I had to learn how to type from my mom in class. So I don't type 80 words a minute, but I'm close.
That's how my dad gave us this hope that
Yeah,
there's
it's
a
amazing.
future for you.
Yeah.
We just didn't know where. We didn't know when.
Right.
We didn't know how. And another thing, we used to send letters to all different embassies asking for political asylum, religious asylum. And every time a response would come out, we would all rush into the postman. So our postman was our favorite guy in the afternoons.
Wow.
Every afternoon, the moment we would hear a knock on the door, we would run to the door and we would wait for this postal guy to hand over.
Because it represented a better life.
Yeah, so I remember that every time we would open this letter, and the very first sentence would define whether we were accepted or not. And they would say, "Thank you for your message. We regret to inform you."
And you knew.
And we knew. Oh, and everyone was like, throw their hands in the air. Oh, we regret to inform you.
Right.
Okay, so this is a no. Let's go to Poland embassy next. Let's go to let's go to UK embassy. Like, we were literally hitting every embassy.
But you never gave up.
Never gave up. 10 years, never gave up.
Until finally what happened?
So my family discussions, and Dad said, well, our future is unknown in here. So one of us will have to leave. One of us will have to go and seek political asylum, maybe in Europe. And then once he gets permanent residency, then he can sponsor his kids.
Okay.
And that's what he did. So he left and he ended up in Holland. And what happened in Holland, the Holland government did not give him any political asylum and no permanent residency status. But they asked him to stay there for as long as he wants to. They're not going to deport him back to Afghanistan because of his status. And so, but he's welcome to stay as long as he wants to. What happened at the time, we lost contact with my father. At that time, we didn't have cell phones, it was just mail, sending mail, direct mail. So we didn't know what was going on with him for a full year.
Wow.
And then we received a letter in the mail that was from the Red Cross. And he found us through the Red Cross back in Pakistan.
And then brought you forward.
A full year.
And then brought you forward to Holland?
No. At the time, my brother, he graduated from homeschooling. He got a job at the Canadian Embassy, and he was working at the immigration office.
Okay.
And he saw a lot of these, cases being processed for permanent residency, and he applied for all of us.
Wow.
So while my father his status was unknown, our case with the Canadian Embassy started to kind of move forward.
Right. And so you eventually made your way to Canada.
Yes.
Your whole family, except your dad.
Except my dad.
Who's still in Europe.
Yes. So my mom tried to get him sponsored, but the Canadian Embassy, after interviewing him, rejected his case.
Right.
And he's been there in Holland for about 20 years now.
Wow.
And the first time I met him, finally, that I was able to travel, I was able to see him, was in 2022.
Amazing.
And he's doing okay. I mean, old age.
Yeah.
He's definitely retired, but he's very active in his church, and he's very much Bible studies, glass of wine for his health.
Yeah.
That's his status. So when I actually, one thing in Pakistan that happened, I want to tell you this story because it's really important. When we connected with my dad, we had no means of communication, but our neighbor next door was a Pakistani single mom.
Okay.
And she had a telephone. So once a week, my dad would call to find out how we were doing, and that's how we managed to kind of start our communication back with him.
Yeah.
But this Pakistani woman, after a while, found out that we were Christians. And she didn't like that. And what she did was that she said, look, because you're good people, I'm not going to report you to the authorities. But I will not allow you to use my telephone ever again. And that was very hard for us.
That's devastating. That was your only way to talk to your dad.
Yes, we were so afraid. We were so nervous. Like,
that you'd be reported.
What are we going to do now? You know? But anyway, I want to say all of this because based off your question earlier, that how do you feel? And that's how we lived our lives, you know, through all of these struggles and unknown and uncertainty. We prevailed. Yeah. And considering the fact that 20 years fast forward, we still haven't recovered from the last Taliban's strike.
In the 90s.
In the 90s. That I had to meet my father 20 years later, and he's still stranded. This is very personal to me.
I was going to say, considering you made it to Canada, you started on with your life.
Yes.
You know, you have a marketing degree working nonprofits, and then
made
all of a sudden,
U.S. Yes,
and then in the U.S., and
yes.
then all of a sudden, this collapse happens in 2021. It must have been like literally watching it all over again.
Yes. Yeah, it was shocking, and I do feel for the people now that they're going through the same, not similar, but at least close to it, with all of the, the evacuations and the uncertainty. I would not want to see that ever happen again. I thought it was a one-time situation. Because if you think about it, Scott, I had a good lifestyle in Afghanistan. And
right.
Had it been, if it was if the country was peaceful, today I would have probably been an upstanding citizen of my birth country.
Yeah.
I would have been probably in parliament. Who knows?
Absolutely. Yeah, who knows?
So, yeah.
But okay, so talk a little bit about the second rule of the Taliban, and it's not talked a lot about on our channel, not because we ignore it, but because we are so homeland focused. It seems like with the terror threat, but there is a lot of terrible things happening in Afghanistan. Certainly, the gender apartheid piece, something unfortunately that you know all too well. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on in Afghanistan with that? And there's a really cool school project that you're involved with that I think offers some glimmer of hope and how we can move forward against some of this. But can you talk about just at a high level the gender apartheid that's happening with the Taliban?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I want to say this gender apartheid, because I understand, in social media it's been really,
is that the wrong term?
Blown. Personally, I feel it is, because the Taliban are not in favor of any women from any province or race or background. I mean, they're treating all women equally violently. So gender apartheid or not apartheid, all women are struggling.
Right. Okay.
There's no
Thank
favoritism.
you for correcting me on that.
No, not at all. I mean, I understand a lot of women, like, for instance, the Hazara community, I understand they feel a certain way, about why they feel that they're being hunted down exclusively. And this may be so. But so are the rest of the 20 million Afghan women, that if they don't follow the proper Sharia law, whatever Taliban law, then they're just as equally guilty as any other, as the Hazaras or the Pashtuns, not the Pashtun, or the Tajiks.
So a wholesale discrimination targeting just based on gender. I mean, which is on display for the world to see, but yet it seems like a casual observance at best from most people when they look at it. It doesn't seem to even evoke a response.
Correct.
I mean, what do you make of that?
Honestly, I can only narrow it down or sum it up to, as long as the Taliban is in existence, as long as the Taliban are controlling the government, they're controlling the people, they're controlling the women. For some reason, the women are. It's hard to understand why are you posing so much restrictions and rules and laws against women. But I believe that's whichever way they're trying to justify it, it's not justifiable to us.
Yeah.
It's not justifiable to all the Afghan women.
But we talk a lot about the resistance, and you know, you see the face of Masood or Saleh or General Sadat. What about the role women play in the resistance? Can you speak to that at all? Do you have any insights on that, whether it's in country or out of the country? I feel like women are playing a massive role in this and will continue to play an even bigger role as this unfolds. Am I wrong?
Well, they are. I mean, there are women resistance groups that they're in Europe, and they're very vocal, and they call on the UN, and they ask them for to stop this. Where they call them the gender apartheid, or women's violence, or let her learn. That was another campaign that was going on for a few years. And but they are vocal. They do want peace. They do want to go back to school. They do want to go back to work, and they want to be able to walk in the park. These are all the things that the Taliban restricted. But the bottom line, again, I see it as you remove the Taliban, then everything will come into a proper alignment when it comes to women's rights and freedoms. So to me, all these, the women out there who are really crying out and they're seeking help, they're seeking support, they want their voices to be heard, and they have a platform that they can make a change. They are world changers. They are nation builders. I believe they need to be able to stand. They should be able to stand behind a strong leadership that once the Taliban's collapse happens, or I guess once they're gone, as we are rebuilding Afghanistan, we need to be able to follow a leader that can actually help not allow any of this to happen again. Of what we're experiencing.
A really cool school project that's happening at the embassy.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so just recently I was in Tajikistan, and I met with the ambassador of Afghanistan in Tajikistan, and he is housing a school within the embassy. I thought it was amazing.
Wow.
They have about close to 500 students of all ages, but the majority of them are all girls, young girls, under 18. And I had the pleasure of touring this school, and every classroom that I walked in and every girl that I spoke with reminded me of myself.
Right.
At that
I can
age.
see it on your face.
Yeah. And I realized, holy cow, we have not even started yet. Yeah. And I do not want these girls to go through what I had to go through. I mean, at least now they have a school, they have, an embassy that's supporting them.
Yeah.
And
one.
Yes, one embassy. And these girls are so hopeful. They are so vibrant, and that I feel like it's my life's mission now. And they asked me personally, please be our voice. I'm like, oh,
No,
I am only
perfect.
one person.
Yeah, but it's
I do
a great
not
voice.
have.
Is there a way people can help with that at all that you know of?
I am hoping, and so I decided to see if there's any help here. They're looking for possibly scholarship programs, sponsorship programs, fundings, anything that we could do to help this embassy, to help the school.
Well, I'll do this.
Embassy.
Let me do this. If anyone is interested in getting behind this or learning more about this, just reach out to me at the podcast, sman@scottmann.com. Colin will put the contact info out there, and we'll get you in touch with Jazz if that's something you want to learn more about or support.
Thank you.
That's amazing. A couple of wrap up questions here. Legend and I were talking earlier about how there seems to be this notion that the Taliban are a partner for us, that they are someone who can actually hunt down ISIS, that they are, I know I can't even say it with a straight face, but that they are to be trusted, and that they are a legitimate counterterrorism partner, and that we can count on them to stand against ISIS, other groups. What do you say to that?
Can I cuss?
Yeah.
It's a load of bull. I mean, no. That's it's the narrative that's been presented to them that the Taliban are helping. They're not doing anything. I mean, it's very obvious. Everything is before our eyes, and yet we're just trying to ignore it. That's just not going to fly.
Yeah.
I believe that the Taliban, they are a terrorist organization. They're a terrorist group, and they don't mean well. They don't mean the well-being of me. They don't mean the well-being of you.
Yeah.
And especially not U.S.
Yeah.
And to believe that they're actually providing legitimate intel, it's actually laughable.
Yeah. But yet we heavily rely on it as the sole source, or the best source of information of what's happening in Afghanistan. And it's informing our most elite operations in many ways, I think.
Isn't that crazy?
It's just hard to, it's almost like the Twilight Zone. And then you want to counter that, and then people actually question our veracity for countering it. Yet we are getting the information of the real threat from all the people that these agencies abandoned in order to deal with the Taliban. It's very hard to make sense of.
It is.
I never thought I would see anything like this in my life, but we are. But we are with a new administration, so hopefully maybe we'll see some change. We're going to try to do that. And to that point, my second to last question to you is, we've had Legend on. I've interviewed him 3 times since the collapse in Afghanistan. We've become friends, as you and I have. But people, I think you and I talked about this a lot yesterday. People see Legend as the resistance supporter, as the Afghan resistance guy, and there's some truth to that, in that he does have excellent relationships and connections with very senior leaders in the resistance of various resistance groups. But I fear that many people don't understand Legend as the American Army combat veteran. What do you think about that?
I've worked with Legend now for close to 3 years now. And all I can say is that he's an American first. He's an American at heart. And he's a veteran. And he upholds the values of the American military. And he constantly speaks about that. His deployments, his services that he's done, and how many times he was deployed in Afghanistan and came back and he was injured, and he's going through the same physical and emotional trauma, the PTSDs, and the you know all of that, and he exhibits all of those symptoms that you, as an American veteran, are exhibiting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see him under that light first.
Me too. Yeah. Me too. And I think the thing that that really gets me about him, and so many other people like Ben Owen and others who do a lot of volunteer work, folks in Moral Compass, is the reluctance that they actually have to do what they're doing. I mean, most of these people, they want their lives back. They stepped up and handled a situation that was terrible. But most of them, including Legend, are reluctant to do this. It's not like what we would be doing if we had our wishes. Right. We would be doing something else. And I don't know that people fully realize that. So I think it's astounding that you and Legend have done what you've done. You've put your lives on hold. You continue to put your lives on hold indefinitely until we figure this out, you know.
Yes.
And so thank you for doing that. Thank you for being a voice,
Thank
not
you
just
for your
for
support.
the work, but for our veterans and for the country. What did we not talk about, Jazz, that you would want to say to folks watching, because we talk about this topic a lot? What would you say that maybe doesn't get said a lot, or that maybe the new administration needs to hear? Anything that we haven't covered that you think we need to?
Yeah, I think just a little bit dab into the evacuations as to, I would say I want to be unkind to be kind, maybe if that's the right phrase to put it, is that evacuations is no longer, is not a good option into immigration, into immigrating
Why
them
do you
into
say
the
that?
West. If you look at it now, so many Afghans that got evacuated, at least the cases that we've seen is that, you know, this individual, or I want to call him terrorist, who went after his immigration caseworker in Michigan all the way to his home and stabbed him, and or this terrorist that sexually assaulted a female veteran not too long ago. And so these cases are continuing to rise, and I think it has to do with our vetting system that is really skewed, and that needs to be resolved before you allow any more evacuations. Why it is important?
It's a very
for me,
unpopular topic, what you just said.
That's right.
It is.
That's what I'm saying. I'm being unkind to be kind, and that's because if I made it through all the way here in the United States, my safety, my livelihood, my family's safety is so crucial to me. So why would I want to allow terrorists to come here, you know, so they could kill me here? Like, it just, I can't seem to process that.
So what do
logically.
you say to these veterans who, myself included, who have done a lot to try to get our allies here, who feel like they have no other option, and frankly, these veterans have spent a lot of their own money, a lot of their own resources, and they are so invested, and they feel like they're the last hope of many of these individuals. What do you say to them?
You know, our allies, when they help our American troops, they protected them, true. They sacrificed their lives, true. But they did it for Afghanistan. You know, they did it to prevent these type of terrorism. They did it to prevent Al Qaeda or the Taliban's reign that's happening now in Afghanistan. They didn't do it for visa. They didn't do it to get U.S. visa. So I believe that the way to honor the Afghan allies, those soldiers, those 100,000 soldiers that laid down their lives alongside the 3,000 American soldiers, is to give back Afghanistan to the Afghan people from the Taliban. And, you know, the first thing you can do is defund the $40 million that per week that Joe Biden was funding them. You know, Congressman Tim Burchett, who's trying to stop the funding, and but Chuck Schumer is holding the bill in the Senate. So we don't want any troops on the ground, but that's what our veterans can do, is to help with defunding the Taliban, not legitimizing the Taliban through these, through evacuations. Because look, evacuations also cost money. You think about it, the Haqqani network controls the passport control department. So every time somebody needs to be evacuated, they have to go get an ID. They have to get a passport, and this passport costs $2,500. So you are actually enriching the Haqqani network. And what do you think they're doing with that money? I mean, for sure, you're not going to you're not going to evacuate 40 million people. You
Right.
know in your heart, you want to do the right thing, but you can't evacuate 40 million people. You can't say, an interpreter is my ally, but millions of women that got raped by the Taliban are not.
Right.
So I would say, let's not enrich the Haqqani network, who's a terrorist organization, Haqqani, who has a 10 million FBI bounty on his head. Let's not enrich them. Let's do the right thing. Let's defund and not legitimize the Taliban. That's our answer.
I think those are thoughtful comments. Legend and I had a similar conversation. I think this is where the conversation's going. We've got to have this conversation. It's a tough one, and I know it's a tough one, but we have to have it. We have to have it because the other thing too that I worry about, and I told Secretary Hegseth this, and I'm not going to stop talking about it. Regardless of what decisions we make in that regard, our veterans and their families are really hurting from this. There's been damage done. It's not just a broken promise to the Afghans. It's a broken promise to the veterans who were trained for years and held to a standard that you do not leave an ally behind, period. You don't. And if you did, you were actually punished for it. And then the very senior leaders, general officers, flag officers, yeah, I said that, wasn't just politicians, that sat silent while this happened, allowed that moral injury to be inflicted on a range of individuals who gave us everything for 2 decades. Now, that has got to be dealt with. And I actually heard a senior officer at a banquet not that long ago, a very senior officer, that if people knew, if I said the name, they'd know exactly who it was, looked out at the room of Afghanistan war veterans and said, you guys are talking about betrayal. You need to knock it off. It makes you look like victims. I mean, who says that to these men and women who gave so much? And then their only mistake, so to speak, was to step into the breach and try to help their friends when the government bailed on them. And so I fully understand your comments, and I think there's a ton of legitimacy to them. And from a geopolitical perspective, it makes all the sense. But what we have to understand is that there is some serious emotional pain around this, and I think there are pre-existing circumstances that will have to be considered for evacuation. Families that are split apart, right. Grave injuries. I mean, there are exceptions where it makes sense, but the wholesale evacuation 4 years later versus resistance, a new era in Afghanistan, I think is where we have to go with the conversation. But we also have to remember that tremendous emotional damage has been done to our veteran population. And I hope that the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, the Trump administration will consider that, because we've got to move from moral injury to moral repair at the same time, or our recruiting, our retention, everything's going to continue to plummet.
That's right.
So thank you and Legend for being a voice on this.
One more thing I want to mention about the immigration. I know this is a whole different segment, but this you might find it interesting. And that's just my perspective on it. And because I've been involved in the immigration and resettlement and with different NGOs before, and myself coming, and being integrated into the Western society.
Right.
I love America. I care about the American people. And the reason why is because when you are a guest in somebody's home, you want to make sure that you do things right to ensure that the host is not being disrespected or mistreated, or
right.
You have to be a gracious guest.
Yeah.
So I feel the same way. You give me this welcoming hand to allow me to come to the West, and you are giving me that same level of equality that you're giving to the ones that were born here. And it is my responsibility to be an upstanding citizen, to do what is right, to follow the law, to, and despite all the downs and hiccups that you may experience in life, but you have to ensure that you're fully integrated into the Western society and respect the culture, respect your religion, respect everything that this America country has to offer. And so my message would be for all of those NGOs who are involved in the resettlement. So now, when it comes to the Afghan community, those Afghans that have been evacuated now, they're just in camps, and now they're slowly going to go through, getting their permanent residence, or however that's going to work. I want these NGOs to start implementing a very structured workshops and educational training programs that would help these Afghans properly understand what the law is, help them understand how they need what the culture is like. They've only watch things on TV. Yeah. They don't really understand the American way of life. Yeah. And they need to fully understand this before they should be exposed into starting a new life here.
It's a great point. There are inherent responsibilities on the shoulders of all the participants here that need to be adhered. And if one group doesn't adhere to those responsibilities, the whole thing goes down. Yeah. Well, Jazz, it's been awesome having you on. I have a feeling this won't be the last time. I know we have a lot of ground to cover, a lot of things to do, but thank you for what you do and for what you do for the effort for Legend. It means a lot. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for being a part of it. Thanks to all of you for watching. I hope you found this to be another angle and perspective of the Afghanistan problem set. And again, our through line is all about connect like your life depends on it. And in this case, lifting the tent up a little bit and letting Jazz talk about her backstory and Legend and others. I think there's a rule in storytelling is what's personal is universal, and the more we understand about those journeys, the more we can understand the position that she takes, the position that Legend takes, why this hard conversation of evacuation versus resistance is so important. She's lived it. And so I hope that you found this a way to get shared perspective. We want to hear your feedback on this, so please let us know. If you like the episode, please rate it, give it a rating, and share it with people that could benefit from it. And keep coming back because we're growing this thing from the bottom up. So thanks for what you do. Don't forget to check us out on Patreon as well. You'll see some behind the scenes stuff with Jazz and Legend from the back. But thanks for what you do, and we'll see you on the rooftop.